In this video, we're gonna be talking about Stephen Curry. So Stephen Curry had a very different impact. Who's calling my phone? Hello?
Yo.
Yeah, what's up?
Bro, I know you seen that trend on TikTok.
Bo, what trend? What you talking about?
The 90s, bro. Michael Jordan has no left hand. He played against plumbers. He is washed.
Bo, what are you talk? Hold up. What's the name of his TikTok? What are you talking about right now?
The 90s are over. They're done. LeBron James is on top. He can play with his left and his right. Michael Jordan was a left-hand loser.
What? Hold up. Let me see what this dude talking about. Let me look this up. U2's? We done with the 90s? What is he talking about?
Done with the 90s.
What? Michael Jordan has no left hand. Wait, hold up. I gotta watch these videos. Now, there's a couple of things to consider when we're talking about the we done with the 90s trend. So, let me just go in order. So, first, let's start with the beginning of it. So, the we done with the 90s trend started when a TikToker by the name of U Reaction has been going through old NBA clips and making voiceovers of it. He watches lowlights and he says, MJ's a left-handed bandit. He says certain players are trash, and he watches and evaluates certain lowlights of certain NBA players. Now, many people on TikTok have gotten a wind of this and have started a movement of we done with the 90s movement. And they have made a plethora of videos and done a lot of things that will be considered hate against Jordan or be considered bringing Jordan down the totem pole, and really saying how LeBron and how the time that we're in now is just way better than back then. So I'm going to tackle these topics and talk about each one and say how this trend is correct and also incorrect.
And I got to worry about trade talk. I'm the MVP. I'm the MVP of this league. The best basketball players in the world. I was honored with the MVP. The MVP, the best basketball player in the world. And when I lose, this is what I got to go through.
You're up 2-0. What's the story? Are you not happy, or you're only half happy, or?
Still to be happy about.
You're up 2-0.
Job's not finished. Job finished? I don't think so.
Okay.
Fellas, we work all year long for it, man. Shaq the man, most dominant player in the world. Championship, it's ours. Love it, it's beautiful. Mwah, 2G, baby, you love it. We out.
So first, let's start with the 90s in general. So more of these things are being made about the 90s skill set and people evaluating how certain players have played in the 90s. So this is what I gotta say. In the 90s, it's way different than how it is now, because now there is way more spacing, it's more offensive oriented, and if you can't do more than one thing on the court, you're not gonna be on the NBA team. Well, in the 90s, it was different. It was way more defensive play back in the 90s, and it was way more team, more play of a certain algorithm is the best I can explain it to you. Like, for example, Bill Laimbeer. Bill Laimbeer on the Detroit Pistons was not a good offensive player. He really wasn't. He was more of a defensive anchor, and that defensive anchor and that mindset help them get the name they know as the Bad Boy Pistons. If you put Bill Laimbeer in today's NBA, he will not be the same player he was back then. He benefited from the 90s. Now, same thing as in now. There's certain role players, there's certain players that you can't put in the 90s based on their skill set and based on how the 90s have played. Each era is different. So when we're evaluating the 90s, we're putting the lens, we're putting the glasses of the 2010s in our heads. We'll watch the 90s when those two play styles are completely different, and we can't recognize that. We're looking at the modern NBA, we're taking that and we're applying it to the 90s when they didn't evolve yet. They were still playing basketball, but players now have learned way more things to do than they have back then. So when we're looking at these 90s games and look at these role players, some of the role players are going to be trash compared to the players that we was now. But when you watch the game and you watch it in a 90s lens and not in a 2010s lens, we can tell that those players was valuable on the court based on the things that the 90s did back then. But objectively, the 90s is trash. The 90s basketball is not that good, and it's for a certain reason. The 90s basketball is not that good because it wasn't that much skill set. It wasn't offensive oriented like it is now, because offensive players take advantage of defensive players. And back then, defense was the staple. Defense was a staple so much that they made rules for Pacific players. Hack-a-Shaq, Jordan rules. They had rules so certain players couldn't do certain things, and they was able to emphasize these rules and play extra hard defense because of the way that the defense was set up and the way that the system was in the NBA. So yes, the 90s is trash, and yes, some of those players, if you watch them on a 2010s lens, then we can tell they don't have the skill set that players have now. Which makes sense because players in the modern NBA are just way more skilled than players back then. The great players in the 90s will still make an immediate impact on the 2010s. Nobody's saying that. But there are players in the 2000s that are just way more skilled than players in the 90s. This goes to the scoring era topic people was talking about in the beginning of the season when Luka dropped 70 and B was dropping insane numbers. It was because players are just way more skillful. So there is no way to stop one player, because even if you try to stop Luka, Luka is still a phenomenal playmaker. He's able to make good reads, good plays. He's also able to destroy defenses. So when we talk about a certain skill set when it comes to each era is different. Each era has a certain era that it lacks in, a certain era that is good in, and a certain era that just isn't good. And the 90s isn't good. When you watch it compared to now, it isn't good. It really isn't. But this hasn't been a thing where it's just now being revolutionized, where people are just not realizing it. Everybody knew this already. If you was an avid NBA fan and you watch old videos like I do, you watch old things like I do, because I watch them to do videos, I watch them to evaluate certain players, I watch them to see on my top 10, that makes sense because I watched them and I realized, okay, this certain player is good because of this certain player is good because of that, and I know what each one was. So I've been in the 90s basketball, wasn't that good, but when we're tackling these great players and we're bringing them down, only putting up lowlights, that's how we know that we're just bigging up LeBron James. Now, this is the next topic I want to talk about. Does Michael Jordan have a left hand? Now, Michael Jordan indeed has a left hand, but when we try to talk about these certain things, it's what makes me mad, because when we evaluate basketball, we don't have to evaluate on just a skill set aspect. We evaluate on how they lead a team, their accomplishments, and them as a player. We evaluate skill set. We put in things that doesn't matter. Now, I'm not going to slander this player I'm about to name, but he is an example of what I'm talking about. Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson was on Shaquille O'Neal's podcast. He literally said he doesn't have a left hand. He has a left hand to a certain extent, but he's scared to go there because it's not that strong. That's one. Two, Allen Iverson is one of the most skilled basketball players of all time, according to certain people. But when it comes to the playoffs, he plays actually horrible. He doesn't play that good. Same thing with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is one of the best basketball players skill-wise ever. And yes, he has 2 rings of Golden State Warriors. But if you see those Thunder series, he has drops in the playoffs. Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is one of the most skilled players of all time as well. But when he got on the team by himself on the Boston Celtics, he significantly played bad. If you don't think so, watch my Kyrie Irving is overrated video. You will see the stats and the percentages I put in that video, because he objectively played horrible. So when we look at these certain things and we try to evaluate from a skill set standpoint, we're going to lose these arguments, because yes, Michael Jordan doesn't have a left hand. Yes, LeBron James all around, but there's certain things LeBron James lacking as well. LeBron James cannot shoot free throws. He is horrible from the free throw percentage compared to these other players. LeBron James doesn't have a quote-unquote bag, if you want to use that argument, even though that is a horrible argument to use. So yes, Michael Jordan doesn't have a strong left hand, but he has a left hand. When you're in the 90s and you're playing basketball, you're going to go to your right hand. You're going to go to your dominant hand, most likely. And then even back then, when they played against those bigs that sit in the paint, they would drive in the middle to get them off guard, or they would drive in the middle to try to get them when they're in the back of the rim. So yes, if you want to say Jordan has the left hand, okay, that's fine. That doesn't negate all the accomplishments he had. That doesn't negate how good he was as a scorer, even with no left hand. So if you want to say Jordan has no left hand, that actually kind of makes it a little bit better, because even with no left hand, quote unquote, Michael Jordan is still one of the best scorers of all time, has one of the most accomplished careers in NBA history, and is still a majority of people's goal. So this trend, in my opinion, is just modern versus old attacking each other again, and the modern players bigging up LeBron James and trying to push him to beat everybody's goal, which I get it. LeBron James is top 2. He is. Him and Jordan are significantly better than the rest of the top 10. But when you keep on doing this, LeBron fans, and you keep on having these trends, having these things where LeBron James keep on getting pushed, and he keep on getting put in categories where he keep on getting put in categories to get criticized, this is where the NBA discourse come in. This is where the NBA discourse gets annoying, because LeBron and Jordan are 1 or 2, whoever you have up there. There is no need to try to put up low lights of a certain player just to make your argument, because we can do LeBron stuff too if we really want to.